A girl from a small town went to a stadium with her mom to watch a Little League baseball game. While the adults sat in the stands, she wandered off to play with other kids just a short distance away. Her mom kept an eye on her from the bleachers, but when she glanced away for just a second, her daughter had already vanished. The police quickly got involved, and they uncovered several disturbing clues. Yet, for nearly 30 years, the girl's fate remained a mystery, until just a few weeks ago, when the truth finally came to light. Morgan Nick was born on September 12, 1988, in the small town of Ozark, Arkansas. Shortly after her birth, her parents welcomed a son, and a year later, another daughter. Morgan had a wonderful relationship with her younger siblings. They could spend hours playing together, and the little ones admired her in every way. When she was just starting to learn how to read, Morgan would practice with children's books, reading bedtime stories to her brother. She was also an animal lover from a young age, and would often tell her parents that she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. In elementary school, Morgan joined the Girl Scouts, where she had fun making crafts, going on nature trips, and just enjoying time with the other girls. When Morgan was 6, her parents decided to get a divorce, but the kids still got to spend lots of time with their dad. In early summer of 1995, a family friend invited Morgan's mom to a Little League baseball game in a nearby town called Alma. At first, she thought about declining. After all, it was a Friday evening, and the stadium was nearly 30 miles away. But in the end, she decided to go and take Morgan along, figuring it might be a fun way to spend time together. On the evening of June 9th, Morgan's mom left the younger kids with their grandmother and headed to the stadium. Although it was a small venue, about 300 people had shown up for the game, including parents and other kids. She found her friends, and they settled in to watch the game. But it didn't take long for Morgan to get bored. After a while, she noticed 2 kids she knew, and they invited her to come play and catch fireflies near the stadium. At first, her mom was hesitant to let her go. It was already getting dark, and they were visiting the town for the first time, so she was worried that something could happen to her. But her friends reassured her that their kids played near the stadium all the time, and there was nothing to worry about. Reluctantly, she let Morgan go, and the girl ran off with the other kids. They stopped by a small hill, still within her mom's sight, and she kept an eye on Morgan every now and then. About 15 minutes later, the baseball game ended, and the players started heading toward the bleachers to meet their parents. Morgan's mom looked away for just a few seconds, but when she glanced back, her daughter was already gone. The 2 kids she'd been playing with were walking towards the bleachers, and Morgan wasn't with them. The woman approached the kids and asked if they had seen her daughter. They explained that before heading back to the stadium, they had stopped to shake the sand out of their shoes after playing. They went over to a car in the parking lot, leaned on it, and emptied their shoes, with Morgan standing behind the car while they were at the front. Once they were done, they started walking back to the stadium, but Morgan was nowhere to be seen. Her friends assumed she had just stayed near the car to wait for her mom, so they didn't think much of it and went on their way. Morgan's mom looked toward the parking lot and spotted her car, but there was no sign of Morgan. She rushed over and checked inside, but her daughter was nowhere to be found. Panic began to set in, and she returned to the kids, hoping they could shed some light on Morgan's disappearance. She asked them where her daughter could have gone, but they had no idea. Although they did mention that they had seen a man in the parking lot while they were playing. He was standing near a red pickup truck, watching the stadium and occasionally glancing their way. At one point, he even approached them and said something, but they couldn't recall his exact words. They only remembered that he spoke with some kind of a country accent. Thinking that this man might have had something to do with her daughter's disappearance, Morgan's mom immediately called the police. 6 minutes later, officers arrived at the stadium and first spoke to the kids who had been with Morgan before she vanished. During their conversation, the police were able to get more details about the man near the stadium. Piecing together the children's accounts, the investigators concluded that he was a white man between 23 and 30 years old, around 6 feet tall, with an average build, a beard, a mustache, and dark hair. The kids also remembered his vehicle quite well. It was an old red pickup truck with Arkansas plates and a white camper shell on the back. This detail struck the officers as suspicious because a camper shell could easily fit an adult, let alone a child. Another odd thing was that the camper seemed unusually short for the truck, making it look out of place for that model. This raised further suspicion that the man might be directly involved in Morgan's disappearance and could have used the camper to abduct her. The kids also mentioned that the man was wearing only jeans and had no shirt on. The officers immediately searched the parking lot, but they couldn't find any vehicle matching the description. After speaking with the kids, they began questioning everyone who was still at the stadium. However, all of the 300 attendees had been focused on the game, and none of them recalled seeing anything strange or suspicious that evening. A search around the stadium also came up empty, so the officers expanded their efforts to the nearby streets. Despite their best efforts, no trace of Morgan was found that night. Her mother was devastated. She refused to go home and ended up spending the rest of the night at the fire station. The next day, the search intensified as news of Morgan's disappearance spread quickly throughout the area, prompting dozens of volunteers to come forward. Soon, the FBI and state police joined the efforts, providing helicopters for aerial searches and creating a suspect sketch based on Morgan's friends' descriptions. The sketch, along with photos of Morgan, was distributed across the town and nearby communities in the hopes that someone would recognize the man. Initially, the authorities also thought that Morgan might have simply wandered off from the parking lot and gotten lost. But as nearly 24 hours passed without any sign of her, it became clear that if that were the case, she would have been found by then. That evening, police also began receiving alarming reports from parents who shared some disturbing stories. One woman told them that just a few hours before the baseball game, a stranger had tried to lure her 4-year-old daughter into his red pickup truck. It happened near a laundromat in Alma while the woman was inside, and her daughter was standing near the building. When the mother came out, the man drove off. She provided a description of the suspect, which matched the sketch of Morgan's possible abductor. The day after Morgan's disappearance, another report came in from a witness in Fort Smith, a town not far from Alma. He saw a man trying to lure a 9-year-old girl into a public restroom, but the girl managed to get away. Once again, the man's description matched the composite sketch based on the accounts from Morgan's friends. All of this pointed to the possibility that the person behind Morgan's disappearance might have previously attempted to abduct other victims or even successfully committed similar crimes in the past. The police focused on locating the red pickup truck matching the witness's description and began checking the backgrounds of known offenders in nearby towns. Over the next few weeks, investigators received hundreds of tips about potential suspects, but they either couldn't establish a connection or confirm that the individuals had no involvement in the crime. Meanwhile, investigators continued to comb the area around the stadium, collecting various items that could potentially be considered as evidence. They found several cigarette butts, bottles, and other objects, which were sent to the lab for DNA analysis. But in the end, the police had no clear indication whether any of these items were actually connected to Morgan's disappearance. As for the red pickup truck, the police received nearly 250 calls from witnesses across various towns and even neighboring states, all reporting sightings of similar vehicles. The problem was that a lot of residents drove similar models, and there were literally thousands of them. Investigators tried to check each owner, but once again, they found no evidence linking any of them to Morgan's disappearance. This continued for 2 weeks until the police received a surprising call. A resident of a town called Stuttgart, about a 3-hour drive from Alma, was on his property when he noticed a man trying to break into his car. The homeowner scared him off, and the intruder immediately fled. When he was running away, the witness saw that the man was holding a little girl by the hand. The police showed him the composite sketch of the suspect, and he confirmed that the person trying to get into his car looked very similar to the suspect, and the girl resembled Morgan. Investigators quickly launched a large-scale operation in Stuttgart, securing an area of about 10 square miles and deploying several dozen officers. Morgan's parents immediately headed to the town, hoping their daughter would be finally found. Hundreds of volunteers, along with the police, began searching the entire town and surrounding area. Helicopters scanned from above, and search dogs tried to pick up Morgan's scent using her belongings. The search continued for 16 hours, but they found no trace of the missing girl. Eventually, the police began to doubt the witness's story. They conducted 2 polygraph tests, both of which suggested he was lying. Although the man insisted he was telling the truth, he eventually admitted that he had made up the entire story. He did see someone trying to break into his car, but he hadn't gotten a good look at the person's face, and there was no little girl with him. The man was arrested for providing false information, which cost nearly a full day of search efforts and thousands of dollars. It's unclear if he faced any punishment, but such actions typically result in a serious fine or a jail sentence. Investigators found themselves back at square one, but giving up wasn't an option. They brought in 17 more officers from across the state, and the team focused on sorting through the leads that kept coming in. By then, they had over 1,500 tips, but none of them brought detectives any closer to finding Morgan. Her parents didn't give up either, but as the months went by, their hopes started to fade. About a year after Morgan disappeared, her mom found a nonprofit dedicated to finding missing children. Although she was still focused on searching for her daughter, there weren't any new clues left to follow. That's when she began helping other families who were going through similar tragedies, and she put her efforts into raising awareness about the dangers that could strike at any moment in a child's life. Over the next several years, police kept following up on various leads and questioning potential suspects, but nothing seemed to bring any progress. In 2001, 6 years after Morgan's disappearance, the FBI released an age-progressed image showing what she might look like. That same year, several well-known TV shows aired segments about her case, which led to an increase in the number of tips. Although most of these tips turned out to be dead ends, one in particular caught the investigators' attention. The caller claimed that the girl's body was buried on a property in Boonville, a small town about an hour from Alma. The police took this tip seriously because the person provided specific details about the case that had never been made public. In early 2002, they obtained a search warrant for the property. Bringing search dogs along, they dug up the entire area, but no trace of Morgan was found. Since then, the case remained cold for nearly a decade. In 2010, police received another tip about a possible location where Morgan's abductor might have held her, this time in another state. They conducted a search, but once again, there was no evidence to suggest the girl had ever been there. Interestingly, in 2017, police returned to search the same house, but this time for a different investigation. It turned out that a man who had once lived there was in prison for crimes against minors, and authorities suspected him in another similar case. But even then, the search turned up no new clues. In 2019, a new documentary about the case was released. For the first time since Morgan's disappearance, police shared a photo of the red pickup truck believed to be connected to the abductor. The vehicle had been briefly captured on someone's camera during the game, but the poor quality and angle made it nearly impossible to make out any important details. Following the documentary's release, police reached out to the public, asking for any information about who might have owned the truck. They received a series of new tips, but despite these efforts, they still couldn't make any progress in solving the case. This continued until 2021, when investigators finally named their main suspect in the case. The man was Billy Lynx, who had come to the police's attention in the early weeks of Morgan's disappearance. Lynx had a criminal record for offenses against minors, and he owned a similar red pickup truck. However, in 1995, police could not establish any connection between him and Morgan's disappearance, even after searching his truck. During his questioning, they felt that Billy was being honest about his innocence. He was also significantly older than 30, while detectives relied on Morgan's friends' accounts that described the abductor as being younger. Now, nearly 30 years later, detectives began to look at him again. This time, they hoped that modern DNA analysis tools could uncover any traces of Morgan's presence in his vehicle. But there were some issues. Billy had passed away in 2000 while serving time for an attempted abduction. Just 2 months after Morgan's disappearance, he tried to lure another girl into his car while she was standing outside a store. Her mother scared him off and reported the incident to the police, leading to his arrest. At that time, he was 70 years old, and he died of natural causes 5 years later while still in prison. Another complication was that police had no idea where Billy's pickup truck was, or if it even still existed after nearly 3 decades. The investigators focused on tracking down the pickup truck, and after some time, they managed to trace its chain of ownership since Billy's arrest. To the surprise of the detectives, they actually found the truck. It was still running, and the current owner agreed to let the police examine it. Initially, the detectives didn't get their hopes up too high, since any DNA evidence could have easily been erased or degraded over the years. But surprisingly, forensic experts found a few hairs in the truck bed that seemed to match Morgan's hair. The samples were sent to a Texas lab, equipped with the latest DNA analysis technology, for a closer look. It took 8 months, but finally, there was a breakthrough. They managed to extract a DNA sample from the hair and compared it to Morgan's mother's DNA. The results indicated a close genetic match in the first degree of relation. In other words, the hair likely belonged to one of her children or siblings. Morgan's mother stated that she had never heard of Billy Lynx and had never met him in her life. Detectives also knew that no one else from Morgan's immediate family could have been in that truck, which meant that the little girl herself must have been there. On October 1st, 2024, the police held a press conference to announce that Billy Lynx was now officially considered responsible for Morgan's abduction, and they had no doubt about his involvement. Unfortunately, no one believes that Morgan could still be alive nearly 29 years after her disappearance. Investigators suspect that Billy killed her in the first few days after the abduction, but where he hid her remains is still unknown. Even though the case is considered essentially solved, the police have declared that they will continue searching for her remains. Still, without a confession from Billy, this task seems nearly impossible. Detectives are also going to look into Billy's possible involvement in other cases. Considering that he had attempted at least a few kidnappings shortly after Morgan's disappearance, the police suspect that there could be many more crimes in his past. At the time of Morgan's abduction, he was already 70 years old, and it seems likely that he had a long history of such offenses. Plus, he had served in the military during World War II, giving him certain skills that may have been used in his crimes. It's worth noting that Morgan's disappearance became one of the most well-known crimes in all of Arkansas. Authorities even decided to rename the Amber Alert system to Morgan Alert in her memory. As for her mother, she continues to help other children and families through her nonprofit organization. This work has been her way of coping with the loss of her daughter, though deep down, she still holds on to a small hope that Morgan might somehow be alive. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.